Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal, and I'm here today with Kurt Leavins. Welcome, Kurt.
Hey, David, stepping out of the sunshine and back into the hockey rink.
Yeah. Is it sunny there on Pender Island?
We've had a beautiful run of weather here. It's been sunny and upper 20s every day for about 10 days now.
Wow, upper 20s. Whew. What's the microclimate there? Do you get much rain, or is it more like Victoria where there's less rain, or Vancouver where you get more?
Yeah, we get less rain than Vancouver and Victoria. We're very hot and dry in the summer and rainy in the winter, but not as rainy as the Lower Mainland.
All right. Well, hopefully we will avoid technical difficulties with this podcast. Since we moved away from Skype, which shut down, to our new system, we've had a few little glitches. It seems to be uploading okay here. I had my own technical glitch yesterday, Kurt. My wife looked at me last night and said, "What is wrong with your teeth?" And what is wrong with your teeth? And I have it's called so a few years ago, I fell on the ice playing hockey, smacked my face against my mesh mask and chipped my tooth. Anyway, I have a veneer over one of the teeth here and it's gone. So I got the Bobby Clark, semi Clark smile going on today. So no worries though. It is a small price to pay for playing hockey.
We need you to pull an Ed Van Imp and slash someone across the foot.
It was nobody's fault but my own, though, is the problem. Yeah, I couldn't be mad at anybody. Every hockey injury I get now seems to be self-inflicted. Me stumbling and falling to the ice.
Well, at least you look the part now, Dave.
Yeah, those reverse pivots are particularly difficult. All right, Kurt. Summertime hockey, still a lot going on, though. Still a lot, so we'll talk about three different areas. The Oilers rebuild, more like a reload, though. It's not really a rebuild. It's the reload. Reload summer 25. They've been reloading each summer in recent years to continue to try to compete for the Stanley Cup. And we'll just weigh in one more time, having more time to think about it, digest what's going on, and we'll get into that. Before we do that, though, we'll look at the changes to the Oilers coaching staff, which have come up in the last week. And also, probably the most hotly debated area of the Oilers reload is the lack of reloading in terms of the goalie situation. And we'll talk about that as well. Let's start with the coaches, though, Kirk. So the Oilers made an announcement last week that the biggest part of the announcement is Glenn Gulutzan moving to Dallas and Paul Coffey moving from defense coach and cutting his job in half. I think he's maintained his job as advisor to Cates all the way through this, if I'm not mistaken. The announcement was a little confusing because they seem to be suggesting he was going back to that job, but my understanding is he never left it. Anyway, he's going to keep doing that, special advisor to Cates, and he's no longer behind the bench. He's no longer defense coach, which he's been for 2 years on the Edmonton Oilers. They also hired Calgary Hitman coach, his successful junior coach, Paul McFarland. He's going to be running the power play, taking Gulutzan's job. He's a hockey fanatic. We can see he's worked his way up from amateur hockey in the Toronto area, paid his dues, been an assistant coach on a number of NHL teams. He's one of these hockey fanatics you'll find who are hard at it in their 20s and 30s, devoting their life to the game, to learning the game, and working their way into pro ranks from sheer strength of will and determination and talent. They've also hired the former Chicago Blackhawks AHL developmental coach, goalie developmental coach, would have worked with the NHL goalies too. Peter Aubry as their goalie coach, letting go Dustin Schwartz. And they hired a skill coach, Connor Allen. Kurt, what do you make of the moves?
Well, in the article that I wrote about it at the Cult of Hockey, I described it as going off the board. And I stand by that assessment. And people may automatically think that I mean that's all bad. I don't. I think it's a fresh breath of air through the coaching ranks. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think fresh ideas and fresh voices and fresh perspectives can be a good thing. I really, truly do. But he didn't just go get NHL retreads. These are all guys that are relatively new to this spot. McFarland, who certainly has assistant coaching experience, but has never been a head coach in the NHL, so that's something that Chris Knobloch loses from his side. And I always thought it was a benefit that he got from Glenn Gulletson. I think Paul Coffey brought a lot to the Oilers. I really think he made a difference in their transition game, but I do think someone who's a little younger, has modern ideas, and more particularly modern communication skills, I think is the right choice to take the next step with the defense. And in terms of goaltending, I really do think this is a little bit off the board. This is a guy that's never been an NHL goalie coach. He spent lots of time working with NHL goalies, but this is a position he's never held before. But again, fresh eyes, fresh voice, lots of enthusiasm. If you argue that the previous goaltending coach didn't work, take some issue with that. But okay, let's say that you're right on that. Well, this is a new guy, new perspective, new look, new day, right? So I think there's lots of new and there's lots of hope. What there's very little of at the NHL level is proven in this group. And so I guess we'll see how much value that you gain from fresh and new and how much you lose from experience and been there, done.
Yes. So it's hard to evaluate any of these moves. I hadn't heard of any of these three assistant coaches last week, and their names aren't familiar names. So I on one level, we would have all been happy. Like when the Oilers sometimes sign like experienced veteran hockey players, everyone's excited. Like Victor Arvidsson and Jeff Skinner last summer, everyone's like, "Oh, problem solved." When really we might have thought, they're kind of on the downward cycle in terms of their age curve for the NHL as NHL forwards. So if the Oilers had hired, let's say, Peter DeBoer as an associate coach and a well-known goalie coach, we would have all been really excited. But would the Oilers be better off? And that I just don't think that we can answer that. It strikes me these hires are unknowns, and that Knobloch probably had a big say in who he wanted to work with. He's now been to the Stanley Cup final 2 years in a row. He has that experience. A lot of coaches never have that experience. Knobloch is a hockey lifer. He's a lot like Paul McFarland, just someone who's been working away forever at it. And now he's got another guy, I think, who's kind of from the same background, the same school. Canada develops these great coaches. We have since Roger Nielsen, these kind of hockey nerds, for lack of a better word, these hockey lifers who weren't necessarily high-level players. I mean, Knobloch was a pretty good player. He made the AHL. I don't know if he ever played an NHL game, but he was an AHL. I think he was an AHL hockey player.
Yep.
And a university player. And anyway, this is a different path. A lot of Mike Keenan came from this same school of these guys working their way up the ranks. And so I like the McFarland hire. It seems like the right feel because he's had success as a head coach at different levels. Connor Allen, a skill coach, I can't say. I just, you need a great skill coach. Hopefully they got a great skill coach. Again, if they had hired Adam Oates, I would have been, oh, wow, they hired Adam. Like he's got this proven reputation and I think he's really good, like from hearing him talk, but this guy might be just as good. And I don't know it. And I can't say. Aubrey was the one who concerned me the most because, and I don't know. It's just going to that same, that when the GM goes to the well of people he knows, it can be a limiting factor in hiring. I fear that, and again, this might be unfounded. I don't know. This guy might be fantastic, and I can't say for sure. But when a GM goes to that old well of past associates, it's a good thing in that he's worked with this guy and he believes in this guy. So if we believe in Stan Bowman as a GM, if he can do the job, then he should know this is a big decision, right? So you'd think he's just not taking the easy route. He's hiring who he really knows he is certain can get the job done and be an improvement on the guy that they're replacing. With Dustin Schwartz, he was on the job for 10 years. It was time for a change. 3 years where Stuart Skinner's plays deteriorated. You can't have that. Because of contract situations, you're not changing out the goalies anytime soon. Maybe in the coming season you will. You need someone who can work with these two goalies and get them above a 900 save percentage next season. And the coach failed to do that this year, and the players failed. So I think it was time to replace that coach and try something new. Go ahead, Kurt.
The other thing I like about this change is that there's one fewer person on the bench from a coaching staff standpoint. I think that will help from a communication standpoint. There's just one less voice back there. There's less confusion. I think Chris Knobloch is probably more in charge, in quotes, than he was before. And I don't look. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. Paul Coffey, who works for Daryl Cates, is standing on the bench beside you. He can't help but look over your shoulder. Whether Chris Knobloch will ever admit to that being a factor or not, if you're standing in the newsroom and your publisher's looking over your shoulder while you write a story, David, you probably have certain feelings about it, right?
I would hate it, Kurt.
Yeah,
I would honestly hate it.
yeah.
Like in the process of making the sausage, right? Like lots goes into it, and people don't want to see all of it, and you don't want everyone to see all of it necessarily. You want them to judge you on the final product. So to have coffee in the guts of it, they should have, in retrospect, and I don't think I made this point then. So he just should have said that relationship, that formal relationship with Cates is severed. Now, maybe it wasn't because it seemed like they were re-announcing that when.
Yeah,
am I mistaken in the
my understanding, David, is that he never stopped filling that role, whether it was official or not. So
yeah, that's what I thought too, Kurt. Now, Coffey as a defensive coach, listen, every single one of the defensemen who worked for Paul Coffey improved at least a little bit. And many of them, like Evan Bouchard, improved dramatically when Paul Coffey took over. Dramatically. So they all played better. Every single guy. And I think he really did stress making plays with the puck. Don't throw the puck away. Don't rim it. Don't loft it out of the zone. Don't ice it. Make a play. And, I don't know if that went out the window after a while, because we did see a little less of that, at least in Florida, but that's recency bias. I would say that overall, until the final rounds of this recent Stanley Cup final, until the final round, we saw a defense where individually, to a man, these were better players than before Paul Coffey took over. He really did a great job bringing out the best of these defensemen.
Yeah,
and
I agree with that statement.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I just don't think from a communicating standpoint, I don't think he's the long-term solution. I think everybody must have agreed to that because he ain't doing it anymore.
Yeah. So there's things that happen on a bench. There's things that happen with the team. There's things that happen with communication. Certainly what we saw, and I'm just going to, so I can't speak to that because I don't know for sure about any of that. I'm not an insider, so I can, I hear things and a little this and that, but nothing that I could publish. So I can't comment on it. What I can comment on, I do think on the ice, we saw one huge problem. He really struggled in the playoffs in particular with his defense pairings. And, the hockey analytics only go so far, especially on ice analytics, which show like the shots plus minus or the goals plus minus when a player is on the ice. Those numbers are heavily, heavily influenced by who your teammates are and who your competition is, to the point where it's sometimes almost impossible to see the true talent of a player just by looking at those numbers. Nonetheless, when you start to get combinations of players, I find them to be more useful. When you're trying to evaluate lines, that's 3 players, and even defense pairings, that's 2 players on the ice at the same time. And you start to get numbers where defensemen are out on the ice together, and when they are not on the ice together. And Paul Coffey seemed to not follow those numbers very well. He was pairing players who didn't necessarily do very well together and sticking with it. He had a particular problem finding a defense partner that worked in the playoffs 2 years in a row with Darnell Nurse. And he also had a problem in, frankly, bringing out the best in Darnell Nurse in the playoffs. That's on Darnell Nurse. It's also on the coach. It is a massive issue on the Oilers. Nurse, unless Darnell Nurse plays his A game or close to it in the playoffs, certainly not his D game, which is what we've seen too often. The Oilers don't win the cup, and they can't win the cup considering his cap space, but also considering the ice time that Coffey continued to give to Nurse. He could have radically scaled back on the ice time and tried to manage it that way, but Nurse played more even strength minutes than any Oilers defenseman. And Coffey rarely found. He did in spurts. Philip Broberg, 2024, Troy Stetcher, 2025, for a bit. Now, maybe it's mostly on Nurse, but I also think Coffey needed to do a better job of rapidly reacting. One big example is Troy Emberson. He was really struggling in the playoffs right from the start. He wasn't playing that well. Ty Emberson, excuse me. There's lots of guys with similar names. Ty Emberson, my bad. And he was struggling. And Coffey stuck with him like at least 2 or 3 games more than he should have. And these decisions have to be made fast, decisively, and correctly. And he was slow in the playoffs repeatedly, I'm going to suggest, on a number of those moves. 2024 playoffs, Kurt, first game, he was going with Nurse and Ceci. The whole Oilers fan base was united. You cannot play these two guys together. They are getting crushed. And in game 1 of the Stanley Cup final, 2024, they were the direct cause of 2 goals against. Might have cost the Oilers the series, like honestly, a decision like that. These are big things. They're not small things. And I think, so just based on that, I'm okay with the change.
Looking back, I think we should also ask how big of a hand Paul Coffey had in Philip Broberg eventually leaving Edmonton. By all accounts, Paul Coffey had all sorts of influence when it came to who played and how much they played and how they played. And we all know that Philip Broberg was slow played through the season and up until the last moment of the previous year's playoffs. And you can blame the general manager at the time, and I, to some extent, I do put that on Mr. Holland. You can blame the head coach because ultimately those are his decisions. Okay, so a dollop of that blame goes to him. But if Paul Coffey had all the power with the defenseman that we're told he had, well, then he's the guy who chose not to play Philip Broberg, and maybe that's one of the reasons why the kid left. Now, we're making suppositions here. We're not inside. We don't know who made what decisions. But I think it's fair to at least ask the question. If Coffey was in charge of the defense, and then why wasn't Broberg playing?
I think I'm much more inclined, Kurt, to blame Woodcroft and Manson. Like the problems with not playing Broberg came much earlier. And I think Vinny DeHarnay was kind of ensconced on the Oilers' blue line by Woodcroft and Manson ahead of Broberg. And that happened before Coffey got there. If I'm not mistaken, Broberg was in the minors when Coffey arrived. And now he could have been more proactive at that point.
That's
right.
My point.
Say, okay, we're going for Broberg. Fair enough. I think it's more of I think he was calling for a trade. Philip Broberg asked for a trade in late November, early December 2023. That's like a week after Paul Coffey's been hired, or 2 weeks after. So
well,
I want
to be clear, David. I'm not sitting here. I want to be clear, 100%. I'm not sitting here blaming Paul Coffey for Philip Broberg going. I'm asking what hand did he have in it. I've already written publicly, and I know you know this, that I primarily put the blame on Ken Holland, and I think that's where it belongs.
And I agree with that. We don't know, and again, I don't know how prescriptive NHL GMs are with their coaches in terms of telling them what to do. I'm sure it varies wildly in that count. Some GMs would really be aggressive and others wouldn't be so much. But yeah, it was a kind of a super slow cooking with Holloway and Broberg, that's for sure. And it turned out into it, like, let's be honest, the Titanic hitting an iceberg. in terms of the
Wasn't good.
Oilers.
Not enough lifeboats.
Not good. All right. Not enough lifeboats. Some. The SS Podkolzin and the SS Emberson. All right. Let's move on. I think we've covered that. We've covered that. That's the goalie debate, and it's really an interesting debate, Kurt. Why don't you take it from here? You just wrote about it. How would you frame? What are you seeing in this debate? Just frame it for everybody.
Yeah, if I can give everybody the Reader's Digest version of what I wrote this morning, what I wrote was, hey, I get if you feel the Oilers need to improve their goaltending. Given that they've gotten to the Stanley Cup Finals twice and haven't won, and goaltending was at least a factor in both of those, then I think it's fair to want improvement in that position. Absolutely fair. My point is, unless you're going to get a goaltender that's better than Stuart Skinner, you're not getting better. By just finding a backup who's better than Calvin Pickard, you're not getting better because you still don't have a number one. Job one is to either turn Stuart Skinner into a 1A instead of what he's been, which is a 1B, or find someone who can be a 1A and quit clipping around the edges. Now, I know that's way easier said than done. There was nothing available in free agency. There is no magic bullet coming from Europe. Here's looking at you, Mikko Koskinen. So I get that you want to improve it, but I don't think there's any easy way to improve it. I don't think there's a waiver wire claim out there that anybody knows with 100% certainty can step in and be a better goaltender than Stuart Skinner. And that's the thing, David. Yeah, you can replace Calvin Pickard, despite how good he's been the last two seasons. The guy you need better is Stuart Skinner. And if you can't get there, then you need someone better than him. And that's my take.
So I'm on the opposite side of this in that I think you're most likely to find it's really hard to trade for a number one goalie. You know, as Stan Bowman famously said, there's no aisle in the grocery store like full of number one goalies, and you just go, well, let's pick that one. That's not how it happens. You got to get a little. You're going to find a number one goalie, I think, most likely by looking at these goalies who have had real success as in minor pro leagues for an extended period of time, and bringing in one of those goalies to challenge Skinner. And so why would you do that? Because you have Calvin Pickard. I just don't think Calvin Pickard is a number one goalie. I know again, people really strongly object to that. Some people just love the guy and, will point to his great record in the playoffs this year. But I don't think he's the number one goalie for the Oilers for the next 2 or 3 years. You've got to find that. They've got to find that this season before the end of the season. So Skinner's going to have to step up. If he doesn't, we already know it's not Pickard. So knowing that, what do? I think you bring in the next best option. And you look at all of these teams that have 3 or 4 goalie deep and can only protect 2 of them at the waiver draft. You're focusing in on them and you're picking the best one of those guys you can get because you're thinking he's probably going to be at least as good as Calvin Pickard as a backup, or he'll be close. But he has the chance of competing for the number one job, which is the real answer. So because Pickard if Pickard doesn't check box one, that he can be the starting goalie, you've got to use his position to find someone who can check box one. And that's why I would go with somebody else. Now, you might be able to keep Pickard. You might be able to slide him through to the minor leagues. I think there's a good chance of that, actually, because most teams aren't looking for backup goalies or that kind of thing. Let's say there's a 75% chance he'll get clear waivers and you'll be able to keep Calvin Pickard in the organization. But if the right goalie comes up, then you'll have that guy who can challenge Skinner. Go ahead, Kurt.
So 2 things on that. I agree with you that Calvin Pickard isn't a number one goaltender. What he is a really good NHL backup. That's what he is.
Yes.
Right? And I won't pretend that he's anything more than that. Here's the thing. Anybody that you can bring in now who hasn't been in the NHL hasn't been in the NHL for a reason. They've never been an NHL goaltender. So you're taking the gamble that this is the guy when they've never had the job before, right? They're green as grass
Yeah,
when
but
it comes
usually
to.
the reason is that,
Well, hang on. They're green as
well,
grass
go
when
ahead,
it
sorry.
comes to playing in the NHL. And
Correct. That's correct.
in my opinion, you stand a way bigger chance of losing Calvin Pickard on waivers than you think there is. So if you
What would you put it at?
so if you throw away, I think there's a 75% chance you lose him. So it's pretty much the opposite of what you think. And maybe you're right.
Okay.
Maybe we'll see. But if you chuck out Calvin Pickard for this guy who's never done this before, and it turns out he can't do it, now you're worse. And if you're the Buffalo Sabres, that doesn't really matter. If you're the Anaheim Ducks, that doesn't really matter. But if you're the Edmonton Oilers in the Stanley Cup window, getting worse at goal isn't an option. It's a big risk.
So fair enough, Kurt. Here's how I would say the process would go. You need to have a number one goalie by March. I think the trade deadline's March 6th this year. March 6th, you got to have someone in place who you are confident is a good bet to be solid in the playoffs. I mean, Connor Hellebuck he was a good bet to be good in the playoffs, and he wasn't. So you just never know. But you want someone who you're confident is a good bet. So it could be Skinner. So let's say it could be Stuart Skinner, but by now you have questions about that. So what you want is early in the year, someone you can test out other than Skinner to see if he can be that guy. So if they both fail, Skinner and the new goalie that they bring in, they both fail, and you've painted that picture well, that's a big problem, then you trade. So it's not like you don't have options at some point to fix that problem. But you're going through a process, because if you don't bring in that goalie, then you've got Skinner and Pickard. And you know the answer with Pickard. He's not a number one guy. Skinner will either be or he won't, and you'll know that. But if he's not, then you have two guys that you know. So you bring in this other guy. So if Skinner is struggling, then you go to this other guy. If he doesn't work, maybe you got another chance then to pick up someone on waivers as you go along. Maybe you get another bullet in your chamber. You can fire that as well before the trade deadline. You can keep working to find the right guy. And it's not the best option, Kurt. That there is no easy option here. And I just think you need to go through a process where you maximize your odds of finding the number one guy.
And at the end of the day, I just don't believe you can win a Stanley Cup through the waiver wire.
That's a good point.
This is what makes good podcasts,
I
right?
thought I had you convinced.
It's both of us agree on the problem.
Hey, you're making sense there.
Yeah, both of us agree on the problem. We just don't agree on the solution.
You just pulled that card, Kurt, and you threw down the trump card, man. Like I'm reeling right now. I got the Queen of Spades thrown at me, and the Queen of Spades. All right, that's in hearts. Yeah, maybe you don't. And listen, how many waiver wire goalies have led their team to the Stanley Cup final? So it's most likely if Skinner doesn't do it, it's most likely a trade, right? So and you're thinking, let's just keep stability till then and bet on Skinner. Maybe he gets it done. Bet on Skinner, and then if he doesn't, then it's the trade.
Yep, these two guys got into the Stanley Cup Finals twice. But if by January it's looking shaky, that's when Trader Stan goes to work.
Yeah. When was the last time a goalie did off the waiver wire lead his team to the Stanley Cup? Kurt,
I'm guessing it would be more common than off the waiver wire.
Oh, you mean a trade? Yeah. No, I'm just saying off the waiver wire. Has it ever happened off the waiver wire? Probably.
I can recall.
But maybe not likely.
Maybe I'm missing something.
Yeah. Well, maybe they'll have to trade for, here's the thing. Let's say it's this goalie. Everyone's talking about this goalie, DiPietro from Boston. Let's say it's him. By the time if he goes in the waiver wire, I don't think the Oilers are getting him. The Oilers aren't first on the waiver wire.
Second last, right?
It sounds like DiPietro is a really good goalie at the AHL level. He's been one of the best goalies for a couple years now. So, at the AHL. Yeah. So they're not going to get him. Someone else will take him on the waiver wire. So that they'd have to trade for him. They'd have to give up something. Now, Artur's Seelovs went to Pittsburgh for a 4th round draft pick. Maybe it would be similar to that, which wouldn't be too high a price to pay. All right. Well, Kurt, I think we've beat that one. We've beat that one down. We've solved the problem.
Well, I'm sure the fans will have more ideas and more to say about it. I don't think it's going away anytime soon.
The fans I love best are the ones where when anyone ever goes on the waiver wire, they're upset the Oilers don't take them. Or someone's up on a trade like, we got to get that guy. They want every player, almost every player. They want every player. I get the instinct. That'd be great to have every player.
And they care, right? Which is awesome.
Choices. All right, we're encountering a few technical difficulties here. Are you there, Kurt? You're there.
I'm still here.
Excellent. All right, let's move on to the reload. The reload. And my thought heading into this, Kurt, looking at the Oilers lineup, is that when you look at goal scoring in the playoffs and who's come and gone from the team, one does not simply replace 31% of the goal scoring on this team from the playoffs. The Oilers have lost a lot of firepower up front and a lot of guys who came through for them in the playoffs. And when I look at it rationally, we all have, I'm full of optimism. I'm a fan and all that stuff. But it was always apparent that once Draisaitl's contract ended and Bouchard's contract ended, the Oilers were going to have a couple years where it was going to be really tough to compete for the Stanley Cup and then when McDavid's contract kicked in even more so. After that, if the cap went up, it gets easier. But there is this year and next year where you're getting these huge contracts coming on board. And this is why they had to get rid of Evander Kane. And it's why they couldn't sign Connor Brown and Corey Perry. These are players they might wanted to have kept. It's a lot of veteran talent that went out the window. And so Stan Bowman is faced like the situation he had in Chicago when Kane and Taves both had new contracts when they turned about 27, 28. And they never won a cup after that, even though those players were still excellent for a long time. It's because of cap issues. And the Oilers have really had a cap slap down right now. It was always coming. It is here. So the question is, how well can you dance? Like, what can you do to fill in, to figure that out, to make good with what you have? And I would say Bowman has done, I like what he's done. I think he's done really well. He didn't trade for Matt Savoy. Ryan McLeod just signed a $5 million a year contract. They wouldn't have been able to probably afford Ryan McLeod. He might not add 50 points here, but he would have, the Oilers have tough decisions to make. And so they have Savoy. They've traded for Ike Howard. They signed Vasily Podkolzin. They're counting a lot. They signed David Tomasek. They brought back Noah Phillip. They're counting on at least, between Tomasek, Phillip, Howard, and Savoy, they need at least two of those players to really step up big and be major parts of this team for this to have a chance to work. It's really hard what they're trying to do. And I think that's what we all are underestimating. That's the elephant in the room for the Oilers this year is these two huge new contracts, Draisaitl and Bouchard. The amount of cap space they're taking, the reality, this is what superstars cost. And when that happens, it has a huge impact on the competitiveness of your team. And the GM is in a tough spot. I think he's done okay with the bets that he's made, but it's still an iffy proposition. How do you see it?
Well, I think the expensive superstars issue is a nice problem to have because if you don't have them, you're not winning. So it's a problem, but you're halfway there if you've got them. The real key, and you alluded to it, is that Stan Bowman has to figure out how to get production from players on their entry-level contracts as if they were $3 million players. That's really the key, right?
Yeah.
If you can look,
or even $6 million.
Yeah, look, even if they got the same production this year out of Matt Savoy that they got out of Jeff Skinner last year, that'd be a win, David, because he's making under $1 million. Right. And for his first year in the NHL, I think everybody would think, high teens and goals. Yeah, that's pretty decent. We'll take that, right? For a first year player. That's the key. The only way you can keep your legitimate stars and stay Stanley Cup competitive is to have guys on their ELCs that can contribute night in and night out at an NHL level. So it is Isaac Howard. It is Noah Phil. It is Matt Savoy. To a lesser extent, it is Vasily Podkolzin. It is Ty Emberson. Those kids have to produce like $3 million players and close that gap. To me, that's the key to everything here. I think the odds say that both Howard and Savoy won't pan out, but there's a pretty good chance one of the two will. If neither one of them pan out, then I think Edmonton's in trouble.
Just checking, Kurt, to see my screen is frozen. Trying to reconnect. Make sure you have a stable internet connection. Hey, Kurt, one sec.
Where did you lose me, David?
Can you say something? Yeah, I don't. We probably have been live the whole time. Kurt, I think I lost you just as you started to make your point. Actually, after my point about yeah. So just start over and we'll edit it together and. Hopefully people are hanging in there on the internet. Hey, Kurt.
Hello.
Oh, I can hear you now.
Do you want me to say that again? Did you miss it all?
Are you there, Kurt?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah. All right. We're having some technical difficulties at this point, Kurt. Did you make your point? Because I think it probably was recorded and I can edit that in. So even though I didn't hear it.
I'll sum it up one more time. You need players on your ELCs making less than $1 million a year to play $3 million players. If you can do that, you've got a chance to close the gap. There's a pretty good chance that not both Howard and Savoy are going to turn out. You need one of them to. If neither do, the Oilers are probably in trouble.
That is an excellent point. All right, Kurt. Well, let's leave it there because of this technical difficulties. And I'll see if I can solve them for next time.
It's the dog days of August.
Obviously not a technical wizard, but at least I'll have my tooth back next time. Yeah. All right, Kurt. We'll leave it there. Thanks for talking.
My pleasure.
And in the meantime, and in between time, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast.